When people told themselves their past with stories, explained the present with stories, foretold the future with stories, the best place by the fire was kept for the storyteller. Nothing like this on a cold winter night, eh? Sitting by a warm fireplace, a cup of joe in hand, and, well, someone to tell a story. Good thing you got old Jed here, or else y'all'd be in a real pickle, wouldn't you? I love this Christmassy time of year. You know, I wasn't bragging about the whole storytelling bit. Folks used to gather around and tell stories during this time. Oh, you've got your Santas and your Rudolphs and your Magi, but folks used to tell scary ghost stories. And I bet no one could tell you a spookier one than an old friend of mine. Maybe you heard of him. Quite famous, really. Went by Ebenezer Scrooge. When I first met the fella, he was a tight-fisted miser, old Scrooge was. A squeezing, grasping, covetous old sinner. Hard and sharp as a flint. Secretive, self-contained, and solitary as an oyster. Had no time for friends or fun. His anger made that clear. Ask his employee, Bob Cratchit. Maybe he was sad because of his dead sister, Fan, or his dead business partner, Jacob Marley. Either way, this was a fellow with a lot of anger. His only solace being financial security. I mean, nothing wrong with that. But he did nothing with his money. He lived in a cold, run-down house and ate mostly gruel. So, made no one merry ever, and to him Christmas was a right old humbug. That's another word for fraud. So he didn't think much of the holiday, to the frustration and confusion of his nephew Fred, and to the other shock of two fellows collecting charity. Are there no poorhouses? Are there no prisons? He asked, and if any should prefer dying. He said they'd better die and decrease the surplus population. But then, one Christmas Eve, about 7 years after Marley died, some weird things started happening. When Scrooge went to unlock his door, he found Marley's face. And when he sat down for his dinner, he heard a clanking and a rattling. And then, out of nowhere, came the ghost of Marley himself, covered in heavy chains. He came with a warning for Scrooge, because Marley never really lived or cared about anyone else. He was condemned to wander the earth in purgatory, seeing what he couldn't share but might have shared, and turned to happiness. All of this was the start of Scrooge's night, full of nostalgia, regret, joy, more regret, terror, and more. The first ghost was the ghost of Christmas past. Now, this year ghost was someone like a candlestick and carried a huge cap next to it. Couldn't really tell if it was male or female, though. And he was about showing Scrooge what came before. Showed him his childhood in a boarding school and his apprenticeship under Fezziwig, but also some sadder stuff, like his sister. And his old love, who broke off their engagement after she realized he was obsessed with profit. This made Scrooge real sad. No, I'd be. Does that involve? That's another story, though. Next, Scrooge was visited by the ghost of Christmas Present, a big, jolly son of a gun who wanted to show him the joys of Christmas. Because it's true, wherever you find love, it feels like Christmas. And what better way to show this than to show him his nephew, Fred, having a Christmas party. His family and friends are having a rip snorting good time, while also making Scrooge himself a bit of a joke. But Freddy was brought up right, though. Scrooge hears him say he'd keep asking him every year, because his mother, Scrooge's sister, loved him very much. Scrooge and the ghost flew around, finding other folks celebrating Christmas in many ways. But then they stopped at the Cratchits, the home of Scrooge's overworked, underpaid employee, having as merry a Christmas as anyone else. Even their sick but too pure for this world's son, Tiny Tim. Scrooge takes an immediate shine to the little guy, but the ghost says that if the shadows remain unchanged, the child will die. But if he should die, then let him die, and decrease the surplus population. And that's when Scrooge realized what his words truly meant. The ghost then took him away again, and showed Scrooge two scary, emaciated children, ignorance and want, the bringers of doom to all those who deny their existence, and that Scrooge should beware the first one especially. But the life of the spirit embodying a single day could only last so long, so his life expired, leaving Ebenezer in the care of the last spirit. This is the spirit everyone's afraid of. The ghost of Christmas future. A shadowy figure wearing a black hood and showing only a single withered hand that it used to point things out, 'cause it never says a word. This ghost shows Scrooge's business associates mocking a man's death, and then some debtors celebrating the death of the man they owed money to. Now, we know who it is, and if you ask me, Ebenezer did too on some level. But what shook him the hardest was the knowledge of Tiny Tim's death and the mourning Cratchits. To wrap up their visit, the ghost brought them to a graveyard, where Ebenezer found a poorly maintained headstone and wiped away the snow. It was his! And this, the idea that he would leave nothing because he gave nothing, that his fear, anger, and avarice would leave him lost and forgotten, with no one to say farewell to him in the end. This broke Scrooge. Everything he feared of the world was known to him, and the idea that he would be mocked and abandoned on his death was too much. He vowed to change. And then Scrooge woke up. It was Christmas morning! He hadn't missed it! And his life, that laid ahead of him, and he could still make good on his promises to the spirits. He made amends with his nephew, gave generously to the charity he said such harsh things to, and did good by his employees. And Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all and infinitely more. And to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father. He became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as merry old London knew, or any good old city, town, or borough in the good old world. Now, most folks chalk this up to him going weird in his old age. Maybe he just had a near-death experience. But me, I've been around enough to know that sometimes weird things happen. It can be enough to turn a life around. So when Scrooge told me that it was ghosts trying to bring him salvation and help him realize the best thing a fella can do is lighten the burden of another, I said I believed him. He had no further intercourse with ghosts, though, but it was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well. If any man alive possessed the knowledge, may that truly be said of us, and all of us. And so, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, everyone. Now, wasn't that a story worth telling? If you like that, you should read the book by another friend of mine, Charles Dickens. Well, I've been up last enough of your time. Y'all should be going out now, enjoying your Christmas. Go on, wrap some presents for folks that matter. Give them a hug. Sing some songs. And remember that this is a time when we remind ourselves that we're all fellow passengers to the grave. And don't you worry about me. You have made my Christmas just by sitting here and listening to my story. If you feel like another yarn, though, don't worry. I'll be right here.